with Anna Zobel, illustrator and writer, whose junior fiction series Little Gem was released this year, 2 books so far. And Anna also illustrated Who's Your Real Mum, a picture book written by Melbourne author Bernadette Green. Little Gem is a beautiful junior fiction series about a witch who magics herself away from her school, her witch school, to a little seaside village where she's accepted pretty instantly as the new village witch, although she feels very out of her depth. And Anna, you've built a really beautiful world.
Thank you. Thank you.
But I also wanted to talk to you about how you might introduce yourself as a writer, because I feel like I wrote this little intro for you, but how do you think you would introduce yourself?
Oh, I don't know. I find that so hard. Whenever I write an intro, I feel like it's always really self-deprecating. I don't know how I'd introduce myself. I'd probably say I'm an emerging writer. I would definitely use the word emerging, and I would definitely say middle grade is where I sit really comfortably. So I'd introduce myself as an emerging middle grade writer, I'd say.
And how do you balance your illustrator and writer self?
That's a good question. I feel like they're quite different, and maybe because I illustrate like professionally more than I write. Like I write a lot privately, and then I think because I write more privately, it gives me a lot more sort of joy and maybe exhilaration as well. Whereas I feel like with my illustrating, it's maybe a little bit more procedural, it's a little bit more technical. So I feel like they're quite distinct.
Oh, that's so interesting, and not really what I expected you to say, because I think the Little Gem series, it just comes together so beautifully.
Thank you.
And and so the illustrations in it, along with the writing, just work so well. It actually reminded me a little bit of Millie Molly Mandy by Joyce Lancaster Brisley.
I loved those books so much when I was a kid.
I think it's the village feel, but
yeah.
And so that in that way, how did you get started with Little Gem and writing for yourself?
So I wrote a quite dreadful book a couple of years ago. It was like a historical fiction, and I sent it to Penguin and a bunch of places. I didn't hear back, but I think it was 8 months later, Penguin got in touch and they said that they liked my writing, but they didn't like the book. And they'd seen this sketch I'd done. I think I sent them a postcard of Little Gem, of the character that I'd drawn. And so it was almost a commission in a way. They said, can you use your writing skills to write like a lower middle grade book about this character and just see where you go. So it ended up being quite collaborative. Like Penguin saw the drafts really early on and really informed how the book was like ultimately shaped and how it came out.
You created such a beautiful world, and that's what I really loved about Little Gem. I mean, I'm all here for characters. That's my favorite. The character and place are my 2 favorite things. I don't actually need a story.
Absolutely.
But saying that, like the readership you're writing for with this younger middle grade junior fiction, absolutely, the story is so important, and you need to be able to keep that reader reading, and you did that really beautifully. But
thank you.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you came up with all those characters.
Oh, sure. So Little Gem, she already existed before I started writing the book, and she existed in the form of a zine. So I used to make zines a few years ago, and it was stocked at Sticky Institute, and I'd sell it at like the Festival of the Photocopier and things like that. So she's already quite fully formed as a character in my mind. And then when Penguin asked me to start thinking about a book, I just would sit down with my sketchbook and just see what fell out. And Ghost Henry is the other protagonist. And initially he was just a sheet with holes for eyes. He was just something that I started sketching. I think my intention is always when I'm writing and illustrating is to amuse myself. So I'd just be sort of sketching characters that I thought were funny or silly. And I just kept going until I had characters that resonated with me. And the other factor was that when I was writing the book, I was teaching part-time. I was teaching grade 4. And so I would actually discuss it with my students, and some of them would have input and sort of help me think about outfits and characterization. So that was really helpful too.
I always think that teachers have an unfair advantage when they write for children, even just getting to observe how children interact, but then also having that wonderful like place to go and try out your ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you just, yeah, you know if they fall completely flat.
And that sense of joy that I felt in the book clearly comes from your joy in experimenting and creating these characters. Did you, and in your conversations with Penguin, like sort of think about what messages that you're writing, like, or does that not matter?
My dad was my writing partner for this book, so I always like to have someone on board who's reading what I'm doing, so that I can ask them questions about whether something's working or not. My dad's English, and he read lots of sort of English children's literature when he was growing up, and read it to me as well. So I think when we were writing it, we in terms of messaging, we're both quite anxious people, and we were just thinking about how like an anxious character could overcome those hurdles of self-esteem. And I think that's what we both brought to the book, and what I think comes through in terms of messaging.
Yeah, and it's beautiful to watch little Jem be so unsure of how she can use her magic, and she's obviously worried about getting home, but at the same time she's arrived in this place where she's got a lot of freedom, and she's had a lot of people put a lot of trust in her and expect her to do great things. I just think she's such an exquisite character. Are you able to talk about whether there's going to be more Little Jem books?
I have sort of plotted out a few more, but I don't know yet about where we're going. So, but there's definitely there's ideas turning around. I think perhaps like it was to the benefit of the series maybe to not plan that intensively, because I feel like there's so many directions that I can go within the world that I kind of created. So yeah, I just, whenever I look back at it, I get really excited and think what could happen. Or kids will say to me, they'll have questions. I think, oh, that's a whole book. The answer to that question is a whole book. So yeah, I would love to write more.
That's helpful to have those little prompts for
yeah, just like, oh hang on, I'll just write that down.
And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about your illustration technique.
Oh, sure. I don't think that I'm like proficient in any particular technique. Like I'm not a master of any specific material, I don't think. I think my predominant technique throughout like picture books and middle grade books and commissions is probably speed. I think it's always that toss up between having something that's like sort of technically proficient and well crafted, and something that's like energetic and lively, and trying to marry those two things is quite difficult. So I always try to draw quite fast and not do too many drafts. And I tend to color. No, I don't always color digitally, but yeah, any material that lends itself to speed is probably, yeah, that would probably be my only technique, I would say.
And so you start on paper with like a pen and pencil and
yeah, I prefer to start with a pencil just for the fluidity of the material. I find if I start with a pen, it's too precise. Although I like a big pen, like a big crystal is good. But yeah, I would start with a pencil. I've just been sketching characters here, so I just kind of start sketching with a pencil and try not to do it too many times. But yeah, definitely, yeah, start with a pencil and just build it from there.
Yeah, but you also color digitally, you were saying before.
Yeah, and just for the same reasons, just speed, and I don't really know how to use watercolor or pastel or anything else, so I just like to be able to do things fast and make mistakes and sort of start all over again. I think, yeah, I always have trouble with if it's an illustration is going to take more than a day for some reason. That's like a massive hurdle. I like to finish things. Yeah.
I think when you're a creative person, you're often crippled, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, perhaps it's just me, by
Mm.
wanting things to be right and perfect.
Yes.
And what I'm trying to learn is that just get it to 80%.
Yeah.
And just get it done. And you can always come
Yeah.
back to it and
Mm.
do the 20% later if you want, but having it done is important.
Having it done, yeah, is very important. I think I've almost gone in the other way, and that's why I started doing the teaching the workshops. Is like I wanted a space for myself as well to experiment and fail, and know that I don't have to churn things out. I can slow down and take my time. But definitely that's coming from that same place of wanting things to be perfect and wanting them to be perfect straight away. It's like, no, it can take a few days, you can experiment, you can be really playful, and then you'll get to where you need to be.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I always think, when I think about illustration, especially with picture books or your Little Gem series, so you're drawing Little Gem multiple times throughout the book, having that consistency in her face, in her body. Is that something you just have to practice?
Yeah, it's hard. I think teaching the workshops has helped me figure out how to explain how that can happen. I find the easiest way is if you're designing a character, is to break them down into really simple shapes. So Little Gem is easy to replicate because her head is a circle and her body is a triangle. So it's just quite easy to draw again and again. But one method I used in Little Gem was I had life models for most of the characters, and I took photos of them in poses. And if something was really tricky, I would even trace that photo just to get it looking a bit more precise and plausible. But yeah, it's hard. It's a hard thing to do, draw a character again and again.
Yeah, I think I'm always so impressed. And did you study art at university, or?
No, I when I finished high school, I applied to get in. I think I wanted to do graphic design, and I didn't get in. So I didn't draw for a couple of years after that, actually. And then when I was studying teaching, we were doing a literacy class, and one of the teachers said, "Who's a writer? Put up your hand." And I was like, "Oh, I forgot how much I enjoyed that." So I started doing it again during my teaching course.
And do you see yourself as illustrator first, writer second, or the other way around, do you think?
I would probably say both in equal measure, I hope. Yeah, and I'm also running workshops, so I think it's the trilogy of the illustrator, teacher, writer, probably.
Will the workshops continue? Is that something you're hoping to do?
Yeah, definitely. I really enjoy them. So I would mostly been working with children, but now, we're branching out into adult workshops, which has been really nice.
Yeah, can you talk at all in case people would like to join?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So there's a venue in West Footscray called Handmakers Factory, and I run these classes called Sip and Sketch. But what we do is you can bring a drink along, and we just do some warm-up illustration exercises. And then we do some tutored exercises, and then sort of make an artwork in about 90 minutes. So the idea is to have fun and experiment and play and try new materials. But I try to scaffold it so that ultimately you make something that makes you feel successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And having gone along to one of your Zoom classes, I can't wait to come along in person. It was so meditative and beautiful. I really appreciate what you're doing. And
oh, good, thank you. Because I don't find it meditative drawing at all. So that's why I want to do the classes, because it should be relaxing and fun.
And so in terms of how you approach your work and maybe, planning the next books or next projects, I suppose there's the commissioned work that you've got on one hand.
Yeah.
But in terms of the work that you're going to create, how do you find that inspiration or those ideas? And I also wondered if that's changed. I don't like to talk too much about the pandemic, but I think as creatives, I'm always interrogating what's happening with me and why I am or I'm not writing. So I wondered if the way you find inspiration has changed.
I think the only way it's changed is that instead of going to the library, I have to buy books. So I think my biggest source of inspiration is just reading really widely. My studio space is in the city. And so for the past few years, I just go to the city library a couple of times a week, and they have such an amazing collection of not just fiction and nonfiction, but manga and graphic novels and picture books. And so I just read really widely. And it has been nice this year to actually buy things and annotate them more, because normally I'm borrowing and photocopying and things. But yeah, I think when I'm making a new project, I like to, I don't know if there's a name, I think I read someone called it like informed reading. So I'm writing like a kind of adventure mystery horror thing right now. So I've been choosing deliberately to read books that will influence my writing as I'm going, and I will like make notes and annotate and things. That's probably my biggest source of inspiration in illustrating and in writing.
That's great. And so what have you been reading lately?
So to kind of inform the book that I've been writing, it's the mystery horror adventure thing. I guess in terms of form, I've been reading Shirley Jackson and Octavia E. Butler and Diana Wynne Jones as well, going back and reading those books that I really enjoyed when I was a kid. And in terms of prose, just looking to, I just read Helen Garner's most recent collection of diaries, which I took so many notes from that, and Axiomatic by Maria Tamarkin as well. Just some amazing writing. So yeah, that's what I've been reading.
And I meant to ask earlier, in terms of with your work with Bernadette illustrating Who's Your Real Mum, how is that process different to when you're working on your own thing?
How is it different? I guess the only thing is, yeah, when I'm writing myself, like writing a book for myself, I already have an idea of the characters as I'm going. There's a bit more fusion, whereas the process when illustrating Bernadette's book was reading the text and then making lots of sketches. So perhaps actually maybe it's more creative illustrating for somebody else, because you come up with more options, and you do more character sketches and come up with more ideas for the visual narrative. Whereas when you're writing for yourself, you already probably have some limitations in mind.
Oh, that's really interesting. And I also think with Bernadette's book, there's this element of the fantastic, because the main character, Elvie, is sort of inventing different stories about who her mums are. And so you got to bring that to the story. Like, it was in Bernadette's manuscript in an idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, you invented that. And so
yeah, the world was my oyster. yeah. I could like, the scope was enormous. Like there was no setting specified. I could do anything, and that was great. I received a grant last year to collaborate on a picture book with a new author, and our book, we'll be working on it in the next year or two, which is really exciting. But that was the first time I've collaborated with an author and spoken to them at the same time. So Flora, the author, she was able to describe possible settings for me, and she's South Sudanese, so she would tell me about cultural artifacts that could belong in those settings, and we could have those conversations. So that's been good too. I don't think there's one perfect way to do it, whether it's by yourself or collaborating, or when you're working with a publisher. Yeah.
I mean, it's wonderful to get the chance to try all those different ways and see what maybe works for you as you move forward in your career.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you so much, Anna, for taking time to chat with me today. I do want to mention that this episode is being supported by Squishy Mini Bookshop in Kyneton.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful, the beautiful independent bookshop an hour or two away from Melbourne. You might know them from their story times that they've been putting online through lockdown and do in store when we can. I love Squishy Mini for this commitment to community and to fostering reading in their local community, as well as their commitment to social justice, which it's embodied in everything that they do in that shop. So very grateful to them for supporting this episode. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you. And thank you, Squishy Mini. Thank you so much for having me.